Welcome to Talk Treatises. If you are joining us for the first time, this is the show where we try to pull the really foundational books off the shelf.
The dusty ones.
The really dusty ones, yeah. And we blow off the cobwebs and try to figure out, why did these texts build the world we live in? We're not just here for a history lesson.
No, not at all. We're here for the arguments, the fights, the ideas that just refuse to go away.
And today we're doing something a little different. Usually we're looking at, big historical movements or scientific ideas, but today we're looking at what is arguably the blueprint for Western ethics. We're looking at Plato.
And not just any Plato. I mean, we're not doing the Republic, which is the one everyone kind of gets in Philosophy 101 and then forgets.
Right.
We are tackling the Gorgias. And, you could make a very strong case that this is the most aggressive, the most confrontational, and maybe the most psychologically revealing thing Plato ever wrote.
I have to say, reading through the materials for this, it felt less like a polite philosophy seminar and more like a very tense, very awkward dinner party.
That's it.
The kind where everyone ends up insulting each other by the time dessert comes around. It's a cage match.
It is exactly that. It's a cage match between two just fundamental ways of seeing the world. In the red corner, you've got the art of rhetoric.
So persuasion, politics.
Politics, power, winning. Winning at all costs. And then in the blue corner, you have philosophy.
Truth, justice.
No.
The health of the soul, as he puts it.
And in this dialogue, they really do fight to the death.
Okay, so let's set the stage for everyone, because the context here is, well, it's everything. We're in Athens.
Right.
But you have to picture this right. This is not the golden age Athens of, pristine white marble and peaceful philosophers walking around in togas. This is a gritty, dangerous time.
It really is. We're probably looking at the period either during or just after the Peloponnesian War. Athens is. It's unstable. The democracy is incredibly volatile.
And the setting is the house of a man named Calicles. Who's he?
He's a wealthy, very ambitious Athenian politician, and he's hosting what you could call a sort of VIP after party.
And the guest of honor is this figure, Gorgias. Maybe we should introduce the cast of characters before we get into the fight itself.
Good idea.
Who is Gorgias? You described him in the notes as a rock star. That seems like a bit of a stretch for a guy who, teaches public speaking?
It really isn't, though. I mean, you have to transport yourself into the economy of ancient Athens. If you wanted to get powerful, if you wanted to get rich, you didn't, start a tech company.
Right.
You got elected. You sued people. You spoke in the assembly. And the ability to speak what they called rhetoric, that was the killer app of the 5th century BC.
So it's the ultimate skill.
It's the ultimate skill. And Gorgias is a sophist. He's one of these traveling intellectuals. He goes from city to city, apparently wearing these incredible purple robes with gold embroidery, charging enormous fees, and drawing huge crowds.
And what's his big claim to fame?
He claims he can speak on any subject for any length of time and answer any question you throw at him. He is, in his own mind, the absolute master of persuasion.
So he's selling the keys to the kingdom.
Precisely. And he's got his entourage with him. There's Polus.
Who's he?
He's sort of the young, hot-headed disciple. The text actually describes him as being like a colt, young, wild, really eager to prove himself and defend his master.
And then finally, our host, Calicles.
Yeah, and Calicles is maybe the most interesting of the three because he's not a professional teacher. He's not a philosopher. He's a real politics statesman.
A man of action.
A man of action. He's cynical. He's ambitious. And he represents the brutal reality of how Athenian politics actually worked. He thinks might makes right. And frankly, he thinks Socrates is a complete and utter fool.
And then, of course, there's Socrates, who shows up late.
He always shows up late.
He arrives late. He's missed Gorgias's big exhibition speech, and he basically says, oh, that's fine. I didn't want to hear a long speech anyway. I just want to know who this man is and what he actually does.
And that's the setup. This is the opening bell for what is truly a battle for the soul of the city. I know it sounds dramatic, but that is what's at stake.
It's rhetoric versus philosophy.
Exactly. And as we go through this, I think it's helpful for you, the listener, to keep one single question in your mind. It's the question Socrates eventually just puts on the table. And it is, I think, the most dangerous question a human being can ask.
Which is?
How should we live? Not how do we get rich, not how do we win elections, but what is the right way for a human to live?
Okay, so let's unpack this. Section 1.
Exactly.
This is Socrates cornering the old master, Gorgias.
Yeah.
He wants a definition.
Right. He just wants to know, what is rhetoric?
And he insists on what he calls Spartan brevity.
Yeah, he knows Gorgias's game. Gorgias loves to give these long, flowery, almost hypnotic speeches where he just dazzles you with words but doesn't actually say anything concrete.
So Socrates cuts off his oxygen.
Completely. He says, no speeches, short answers, define your job. He keeps asking, what is the subject matter of your art?
Right. He says, look, if I ask a weaver what their art is about, they say it's about making clothes.
If I ask a musician, they'll say composing melodies. So he asks Gorgias, what is rhetoric about?
And Gorgias's first answer is, well, it's very grand. He says it's about the greatest and best of human things.
Which, I mean, it sounds amazing, but it means absolutely nothing. It's so vague. And Socrates pushes him. He says, okay, but the doctor says health is the greatest thing. The personal trainer says physical strength is the greatest thing. The businessman says wealth is the greatest thing. What do you produce?
So Gorgias finally has to pin it down. And he says it's the power of persuasion.
Specifically, persuasion in the places that matter.
The law courts and the assembly.
Exactly. It's the ability to stand up in front of a huge crowd and get them to do whatever you want. And he actually brags about it. He says, with this power, the physician becomes your slave, the trainer becomes your slave.
Why? Because you can persuade the city to pay you, not them. You're more valuable.
Right. And this leads us to the first really critical distinction that Socrates makes. And it's a distinction that just completely destroys Gorgias's entire position.
This is the knowledge versus belief trap.
Exactly.
Okay, let's break this down because I think in modern English, we use know and believe almost like they're the same thing.
Socrates forces a massive wedge between them. He asks Gorgias a simple question. Is there such a thing as false belief?
And Gorgias says, yes, of course. People believe lies all the time.
Okay. Then Socrates asks, is there such a thing as false knowledge?
Strictly speaking, no. I mean, if you know something, it has to be true. If it turns out it was false, well, you never actually knew it in the first place. You just thought you knew it.
Bingo. Knowledge implies truth. Belief does not. So Socrates asks the killer question. Does rhetoric give the audience knowledge? Does it actually teach them the deep truth of whatever they're debating? Or does it just create belief?
Well, the analogy they use is pretty damning. Gorgias admits that he can go into a hospital with his brother, who's a doctor.
Right.
And if there's a patient who refuses to take their bitter medicine, Gorgias can persuade them to take it, even when the doctor, the actual expert, can't.
And he's proud of this. He's saying, look at me. I know nothing about medicine, yet I am more powerful and more persuasive than the doctor.
But Socrates just flips that right back on him.
He does. He says, essentially, so what you're telling me is that you are an ignorant man persuading other ignorant men that you know more than the actual expert.
It's the triumph of the charlatan.
It is. Rhetoric creates belief without creating knowledge. It can convince a crowd about what is just or unjust, but it doesn't actually teach them a single thing about what justice truly is.
And this is where the trap snaps shut. Socrates pivots to the morality of it all. He asks Gorgias, do you teach your students about justice?
And Gorgias says, of course, if a student comes to me and doesn't know right from wrong, I will teach him.
He has to say that, right? He can't stand up in polite Athenian society and say, yeah, I teach people how to get away with murder for a hefty fee.
He has to claim the moral high ground. But Socrates remembers something Gorgias said earlier.
Which was that if a student uses rhetoric unjustly, the teacher shouldn't be blamed. He made an analogy to a boxing coach.
Exactly. A boxing coach isn't responsible if a student goes out and punches someone in a bar fight.
And there's the contradiction.
There it is. Socrates points out, look, if you teach a man carpentry, he becomes a carpenter. If you teach a man music, he becomes a musician. Therefore, if you actually teach a man justice, he must become
just.
He must become a just person. A man who truly knows what justice is, in the Socratic view, would never willingly choose to be unjust.
So if Gorgias's students are running around Athens doing unjust things with the skills he taught them,
it proves that Gorgias never taught them justice in the first place. He's a fraud. His whole enterprise is a sham.
And Gorgias is. He's just stunned into silence. He's publicly embarrassed. And that's the moment the polite dinner party ends and the real brawl begins.
It is. Paulus, the young disciple, he just jumps in. He is furious that Socrates has tied his master up in these, what he sees as just silly logic games.
And he demands that Socrates define what he thinks rhetoric is. If it's not a noble art, then what is it?
And Socrates' answer is, I think, one of the most famous and devastating insults in the history of philosophy. He says rhetoric isn't an art at all. It's a knack. It's a routine.
And he compares it to cookery.
To cookery, yes. This is the great analogy, what I call the geometry of the soul. And we really need to visualize this because it's such a brilliant, elegant classification system. Socrates divides all of human care into two parts: care for the body and care for the soul.
Okay, let's break it down. Let's start with the body. He says there are true arts and then there are false flatteries.
Correct. So the true art that maintains a healthy body is gymnastics, exercise, training. The true art that restores a body when it's sick is medicine.
Clear enough. And the false ones, the flattery.
Well, the false flattery that just mimics gymnastics is attiring.
Makeup, fancy clothes.
Exactly. Things that make you look healthy and fit without you having to do any of the actual work. And the false flattery that mimics medicine is cookery.
I love this part of the analogy because medicine might taste awful, but it actually cures you.
Right, it's good for you.
But cookery, rich sauces, sweets, pastries, it tastes amazing. It gives you the feeling of pleasure. It mimics well-being, but it doesn't give a damn about your actual health. It just aims for pleasure.
Precisely. Now, apply that same logic to the soul. The true art that maintains the health of the soul, that builds a good and healthy society, is legislation, lawmaking.
And the true art that restores a sick soul, that corrects wrongdoing.
That's justice.
So the court system, punishment, correction. In its ideal form, anyway.
Yes, in its ideal form. Now, what are the flatteries on this side? The fake version of legislation, he says, is sophistry, making up clever arguments and finding loopholes. And the fake version of justice
is rhetoric.
Is rhetoric.
So rhetoric is to the soul what cookery is to the body.
It's spiritual junk food.
Wow.
It creates the illusion of health in the soul. A rhetorician stands up in court, he makes the jury feel good, he makes the criminal sound sympathetic, he uses all this flowery language to mask the truth. It's tasty, it pleases the crowd, but it does nothing to cure the actual disease of injustice.
This, as you can imagine, enrages Paulus even more, because Paulus is obsessed with one thing: power. He looks at the rhetoricians and the tyrants and he says, how can you call this cookery? These men have the ultimate power. They can have anyone killed, anyone banished. They can confiscate anyone's property just by saying so. That's not a knack. That's godlike.
And this launches us into what I think is the most radical, the most counterintuitive argument in the entire dialogue. Socrates looks Paulus right in the eye and says, tyrants and rhetoricians have the least power of any citizens in the city.
Which just sounds absurd on its face. I mean, a tyrant can order your execution. How is that not power?
Socrates makes a crucial distinction here. It's the distinction between doing what you think is best and doing what you will.
Okay, let's unpack that because it's a bit tricky.
Think about it this way. When you take some horrible bitter medicine, do you will the act of taking the medicine? Do you desire the bitter taste, the nausea?
No, of course not. You will the result.
Yeah.
You want to be healthy.
Exactly. You do the unpleasant act for the sake of an ultimate good. Socrates' big claim is that every single human being, deep down, wills their own good. We all want to be happy, to flourish, to live a good life. That's our fundamental will.
So if a tyrant executes a political rival because he thinks it will make him secure and therefore happy.
But in reality, if that act of murder damages his own soul, it makes him paranoid, it fills his life with fear and misery, then he has done what he thought was best in the moment, but he has failed completely to do what he truly willed.
He shot himself in the foot.
He shot himself in the foot. He has no real power to get what he actually wants, which is a good and happy life. He's just flailing around blindly, causing harm to himself and others.
This leads us into the two great paradoxes of the Gorgias. Paulus is sitting there thinking being a tyrant is the best thing ever because you can do whatever you want and get away with it. And Socrates just drops two bombs. First, he says it is worse to do injustice than to suffer it.
And Paulus just laughs at this. He says, oh, come on, Socrates, don't be ridiculous. If you could secretly kill your enemy, take all his money, and be guaranteed to never get caught, you'd do it. Everybody would.
But Paulus does admit one thing. He admits that doing wrong is uglier. It's more shameful. But he insists it isn't worse or more evil.
And Socrates traps him with a bit of logic, almost like math. He says, look, words like beautiful and shameful or ugly aren't just random. When we call something beautiful, we usually mean it's either pleasant to experience or it's beneficial good for us.
Okay, so therefore, shameful or ugly must mean the opposite. It must be either painful or ill harmful.
Exactly. So Socrates asks him, if doing an injustice is more shameful than suffering one, which Paulus has already admitted, then it must be either more painful or more evil.
Right. And is it more painful to mug someone than to get mugged?
No, getting mugged hurts a lot. Mugging someone is physically pretty easy.
So since doing the injustice isn't more painful.
The only remaining reason for it to be more shameful is that it must be vastly more evil. It does more damage. It corrupts the most important part of you, your soul. Therefore, the doer of the injustice is in a far worse state than the victim.
And that just sets up the second paradox, which is, I think, even harder for a modern person to swallow, Socrates says. The wrongdoer who escapes all punishment is more miserable than the one who is caught and executed.
This brings us right back to that medical metaphor. Wrongdoing is a disease of the soul. It's a cancer. It's a rot.
And punishment justice is the cure. It's the surgery. It's the chemotherapy.
Right. So Paulus is looking at this guy, Archelaus, a real historical figure, a tyrant who literally murdered his way to the throne. And Paulus is saying, look at him. He's rich. He's powerful. He got away with it all. He must be the happiest man alive.
And Socrates says, no. Archelaus is like a man with a festering, gangrenous disease covering his body who refuses to go to the doctor because he's afraid of the pain of the surgery.
He's choosing to keep the rot inside him. He is the most miserable man alive because his soul is putrefying, and he refuses the only possible cure.
So Socrates concludes, and this is just stunning, that the only valid use for the art of rhetoric is not to defend yourself in court.
But to accuse yourself.
Right. If you commit a crime, you should use all your powers of persuasion to convince the judge to punish you as harshly as possible, just like you'd beg a doctor to perform a painful operation to save your life.
You can just imagine how this lands in the room. Paulus is just completely baffled. He has no answer. But Calicles has been listening to this whole thing, and he has had enough.
Enter the heavyweights, section 4. Calicles finally steps in, and he basically asks, Socrates, are you joking?
Yeah.
Or are you serious? Because if you're serious, then all of human life is completely turned upside down.
And Calicles is such a formidable opponent because he drops all the pretense. He doesn't care about shame or justice in the way Gorgias and Paulus do. He goes straight for the jugular with the distinction between nomos, which is convention or law,
and physis, which is nature.
Right. And this is an argument that is still incredibly powerful today. Calicles says that all this morality you talk about, justice, fairness, equality, these are just tricks. They're rules invented by the weak majority to control and hold back the strong minority.
It's a conspiracy of the herd.
It is. He says, just look at nature. Does the lion feel guilty and apologize to the antelope? No. The strong dominate the weak. That is the true law of the universe. The better man, the superior man, should rule the worse man. He should take whatever he wants. Might makes right.
And he attacks Socrates personally. He accuses him of being childish.
Oh, it's brutal. He says, philosophy is a cute little toy for children to play with, but if you're still doing it when you're a grown man, it's frankly embarrassing. You become useless in the real world.
You can't defend yourself in court. You can't run a business. You can't make money. You're just a victim waiting to happen.
It's a very direct, very masculine, very aggressive attack. He basically tells Socrates to grow up, get a real life, and learn how the world actually works before he gets himself killed.
And Calicles then proposes his own definition of happiness, which is just pure, unadulterated hedonism.
Yes. He says the ideal life, the life of the strong man, is to have huge, intense, powerful desires and then to have the power to satisfy them all. Restraint, he says, is for the weak. It's for slaves.
And Socrates counters this with two really unforgettable images. The first one is the leaky jar.
Right. He says the hedonist, the man Calicles describes, is like a man trying to fill a jar that's riddled with holes. He's constantly running back and forth to the well, pouring water in, but it just flows right out. He can never, ever rest. He is a slave to his own needs.
Whereas the temperate man, the man of restraint, has a sound, solid jar. He fills it up, puts the lid on, and then he can relax. He's self-sufficient.
And Calicles just scoffs at that. He says, the man with the full jar is dead. He has no more desires. He's no different from a stone. Calicles wants the constant flow. He wants the itch and the satisfaction of the scratch over and over.
Which leads to the second image, the stone curly, this messy bird. And Socrates asks, effectively, if happiness is just this constant cycle of intake and output, of itching and scratching, is that really a happy life? Or is it just a miserable, endless cycle of lack and temporary relief?
He pushes it even further into the grotesque. He starts asking about shameful pleasures, asking if a man who spends his entire life just scratching an itch is happy. Calicles gets offended, but he's starting to get cornered.
And then Socrates completely dismantles the core idea that pleasure is the same thing as the good. And he uses the example of a coward in battle.
This is such a great, clean piece of logic. He asks Calicles, in a battle, when the enemy army finally retreats, who feels more pleasure, more intense relief, the brave man or the coward?
Well, the coward, obviously. The brave man wasn't that scared to begin with. The coward is just flooded with an overwhelming sense of relief.
So Socrates says, if pleasure is identical to the good, then the coward is better than the brave man because he experiences more pleasure.
And Calicles can't accept that. His whole worldview is based on manliness, courage, strength.
Exactly. So he is forced, against his will, to admit that some pleasures are bad and some pains can be good. And the moment you admit that, hedonism as a philosophy collapses. You now need some standard other than pleasure to judge which pleasures are the good ones to pursue.
And that brings us right back to Socrates' core idea of order and structure. This leads into section 5, the idea of the true statesman.
Right. Socrates argues that just like a shipwright doesn't just throw wood together randomly, but builds a ship with a coherent structure, a design, to make it seaworthy.
A true statesman should do the same for the souls of the citizens. He should build order and structure into them. And that structure is called temperance or justice.
And this is where he goes directly after the most beloved heroes of Athens. Calicles loves men like Pericles, Cimon, Themistocles. I mean, these are the founding fathers of the Athenian Empire.
And Socrates calls them all failures. He says they weren't statesmen. They were just bakers and cooks.
It is such a brutal, cutting insult in that context to say that Pericles, the great Pericles, was just a baker.
What does he mean by that?
He means that Pericles and the others just fed the city what it craved. They gave it what it wanted, not what it needed. They built long walls, bigger docks, a more powerful navy. They brought in more imperial tribute. They fattened the body of the city.
But they left his soul sick and undisciplined.
Exactly. And Socrates' proof for this is really fascinating. He says, just look what happened to them in the end. The city turned on them. Themistocles was exiled. Miltiades was almost executed. Pericles himself was convicted of theft. If they were such good herdsmen, why did their own flock turn and try to bite them?
It's a damning argument. He says if they had truly made the citizens of Athens better, more just, more gentle, more temperate, then the people wouldn't have savagely turned on their own leaders. The fact that the city remained wild and vicious proves that its leaders failed in their most important duty.
And then Socrates makes the wildest, most audacious claim in the entire book. He looks at Calicles and says, I believe I am the only true statesman currently in Athens.
Because he's the only one who's not trying to flatter the people.
He's the only one trying to actually improve them. He tells them the uncomfortable truths they don't want to hear. He's the doctor holding the scalpel, not the cook offering them dessert.
And this leads us to the grand finale of the dialogue. Socrates knows this path, the path of the philosopher, likely leads to his own death. Calicles has warned him. Socrates, if you don't learn to play the political game, they will drag you into court and they will kill you.
And Socrates accepts this. And he ends not with another argument, but with a myth, a story.
The myth of judgment.
He tells Calicles this tale, which he says he believes is a true account, a logos. He says that in the old days, in the time of Kronos, judgments of the dead happened while people were still alive, and the judges were also living men.
But there was a problem with this system.
A huge problem. The judges were constantly being fooled by clothes, not just literal clothes, but a person's wealth, their family's reputation, their handsome body, their powerful friends who came to speak for them. The true state of the soul was completely hidden.
So Zeus decides to reform the entire system.
He does. He decrees that from now on, judgment will only happen after death. And both the judge and the person being judged must be completely naked, stripped of their bodies, their status, everything. Naked judge, naked soul.
And this image of the naked soul is so powerful. Socrates says that when the body dies, the soul goes to the underworld, bearing all the marks of the life it lived.
If you were a liar and a perjurer, your soul is twisted and crooked. If you were a tyrant who abused your power, your soul is covered in whip marks, scars, and festering ulcers.
There is nowhere to hide. Your rhetorical skill, your money, your powerful family, none of it matters in that courtroom. The judge looks at the soul, and only the soul.
He tells a story of the great king of Persia arriving for judgment, and his soul is found to be just a rotten, diseased mess. He's sent to Tartarus as a warning to others. But then a humble, private philosopher arrives, one who minded his own business, and his soul is straight and true. He's sent to the islands of the blessed.
And Socrates gives Calicles this final, chilling warning. He says, in that final court, all your political connections and your persuasive speeches will be useless. You will stand before that judge, gaping and dizzy, just as you now claim I would stand, helpless, before an Athenian court.
It's a complete reversal of this world's values. In our world, the philosopher looks weak and foolish, and the tyrant looks powerful and successful. But in the next world, the ultimate reality, the truth, is finally revealed.
And the dialogue just ends there. It's not a happy ending. Calicles isn't convinced.
No, not at all. He basically just gets annoyed and tells Socrates he's bored of the conversation. But the line in the sand has been drawn. The challenge has been issued.
So let's talk about the big picture. Why does this text, this ancient argument, still matter so much? What is its legacy?
Well, I think first and foremost, it matters because it marks a fundamental shift in Western consciousness. It's the shift from what anthropologists call a shame culture to a guilt culture.
Okay, explain that distinction.
In a shame culture like the world of Homer's heroes or the world that Calicles still lives in, your worth as a person is determined by external things. Your reputation, your honor, your power, how other people see you. If you are powerful and respected by your peers, you are a good man, regardless of how you got there.
And Socrates is introducing a guilt culture.
Or maybe better, a conscience culture. Yeah. He's internalizing morality. He's saying the most important judgment is not what other people think of you, but the internal state of your own soul. You could be the most celebrated man in the world, but if you know you are corrupt on the inside, then you are truly miserable.
It also has these just massive parallels to Christianity, doesn't it?
Oh, huge. I mean, the central Socratic claim that it is better to suffer injustice than to commit it is absolutely foundational to Christian ethics. It anticipates the Sermon on the Mount by about 400 years.
And the figure of Socrates himself, the idea of the divine sufferer.
Exactly. The perfectly just man who is killed by the unjust state because he refuses to compromise his principles. Socrates becomes a kind of proto-martyr figure for the entire Western tradition.
And then on the complete flip side of that, you have the Nietzsche connection.
Absolutely. Calicles is the spiritual ancestor of Friedrich Nietzsche. The whole concept of the will to power, the idea that what we call slave morality, things like justice, equality, pity, is just a clever trick invented by the weak to hold back the strong, the blonde beast, the Übermensch.
Nietzsche admired the sophists, didn't he?
He did, because he saw them as being honest about the reality of power. In a way, the Gorgias is just the first round of a philosophical prize fight that is still happening today. Do we live by the law of nature, embracing power and vitality? Or do we live by the law of convention, embracing justice and restraint?
It also speaks to that eternal political paradox, doesn't it? We say we want our politicians to be honest truth tellers.
But we almost always elect the ones who tell us what we want to hear.
We vote for the cooks, not the doctors.
Every time. We want the tax cuts and the increased services. We want the sweet sauce. If a politician stood up today and said, the truth is you all need to consume less, work harder, and suffer for a decade to pay off the national debt, we'd vote them out of office in a landslide. We are Calicles Athenians.
That's a sobering thought.
It is.
All right, before we all get too depressed about the state of modern democracy, I think it's time we moved on to our thought experiment segment.
Let's do it. Sounds fun.
And a quick reminder to everyone listening, these are purely hypothetical scenarios. They are for entertainment and educational purposes only. We're just taking the core concepts from the text and stretching them to their breaking point.
Pushing them into the modern world. What have you got for me?
Okay, experiment number 1. I'm calling it the transparency court.
Ooh, intriguing. Okay.
Imagine a future where we develop the technology to make Socrates' naked soul myth a physical reality. Let's say we invent a kind of advanced neural imaging scan that can visualize a person's moral history as actual physical data.
So like every time you tell a major lie, it shows up as a little dark lesion in the scan. And every time you act with real cruelty, it creates a visible scar or a contortion.
Exactly. And this scan is now admissible evidence in court. You're on trial for a crime. They don't need to listen to witnesses or arguments. They just project your soul scan up on a giant screen for the jury. If your scan is ugly and scarred, you're guilty.
Wow, that changes everything. But here's the inevitable twist. The moment that technology exists, you would immediately have a booming black market for digital cosmetics.
Yes, that's the modern rhetoric. The wealthiest defendants would be able to buy neural implants or designer viral therapies that smooth over the scars that hide the lesions. So you'd have a CEO who knowingly poisoned an entire town's water supply, but his soul scan looks as pristine as a baby's because he paid for the gold package moral concealer.
And meanwhile, the poor man who stole a loaf of bread to feed a starving family and felt deeply guilty and conflicted about it, his scan shows the bright, ugly scar of theft and guilt. So the technology for transparency just becomes another arena for the wealthy to purchase innocence and hide their corruption.
It proves Socrates' point perfectly. Rhetoric, which is just the technology of persuasion and concealment, will always be in a race to outrun justice, the technology of truth.
And the deeper philosophical question is, if we could actually see moral corruption as a physical disease, would we even treat criminals the same way? If you looked at a murderer's soul scan and it looked like a rotting, gangrenous limb, would your instinct be to send him to a prison to suffer more? Or would it be to send him to a hospital to be cured?
Socrates would say hospital, absolutely. Punishment is the cure.
But Calicles would say, why are you bothering to cure him? If he's strong enough to hide his scars or powerful enough to have committed the crime in the first place, let him rule.
Okay, experiment number 2. This one is called the pain-pleasure inversion pill.
Go on.
Socrates' whole argument rests on the idea that we only do wrong because we are confused about what the good really is. We mistake the pleasure of the crime for the good. So what if we invented a pill that just fix that? It inverts your neural response to morality. You take this pill, and suddenly, doing the right thing, even if it's difficult, like returning a lost wallet full of cash or confessing to a mistake at work, gives you a massive, overwhelming dopamine hit. I'm talking like a heroin-level wave of physical pleasure.
And I'm guessing doing the wrong thing, like lying or cheating, makes you physically ill.
Viciously nauseous. You literally physically cannot enjoy being unjust.
Well, on one hand, you've just solved the problem of crime, but on the other hand, you've just completely destroyed the concept of virtue.
Why? Everyone is acting virtuously.
Are they? Or are they just chasing a high? If returning that wallet feels as good as an orgasm, are you being just? Or are you just a junkie for the dopamine hit of goodness? Calicles would absolutely laugh at this society. He'd say, you've just turned men into well-regulated robots. You've plugged the leaky jar with a chemical cork, but there's no life, no flow, no struggle anymore.
He goes right back to the coward argument, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If the coward is somehow better because he feels more pleasure, then the pill-popping saint is no better than any other drug addict.
Precisely. It raises the question, does virtue require the capacity to suffer for it? If you take away the difficulty, the struggle, the choice involved in being just, is it still justice? Socrates might say yes, because the end result is an ordered, healthy soul. But I think even he would worry that without the knowledge of why you're doing the right thing, you're not really a moral agent. You're just a well-trained dog responding to biological stimuli.
And nobody wants to just be the dog.
No, we all want to believe we're the master.
So to wrap all of this up, we started with a simple question about the definition of a word, rhetoric, and we ended at the final judgment of the dead.
We moved from the specific and the political to the cosmic and the eternal.
And through it all, the core thesis remains, as Socrates puts it, to be and not to seem is the end of life. It is better to have a truly healthy soul and look like a failure to the world than to have a secretly rotten soul and look like a great success.
It's a radical challenge to authenticity even today.
And that leads me to my final provocative thought for you to chew on. Socrates made the claim that he was the only true politician in Athens because he always tried to improve people. Rather than just please them, he refused to be their cook.
Right.
Now, look at our world today. Look at our social media algorithms. They are the ultimate form of cookery. They are designed explicitly and brilliantly to do one thing: feed us exactly what we already like. They confirm our biases. They serve us content that makes us feel good and vindicated. They hide the vegetables and serve us an endless diet of sugar.
They are the digital pastry chefs of the soul.
Exactly. So the question is, have we created a perfect global machine of cookery that is slowly but surely starving our souls of any real nutrition? And if we have, is there any Socrates left in the system to even try and shut it down?
Or have we all just muted him?
On that happy note, thanks for listening to Talk Treatises.
See you next time.